Welcome to the weekend edition of the Fast Five by Fear and Greed. I'm Michael Thompson, and hello, Sean Aylmer.
Hello, Michael.
Sean, on weekdays, it's all about the Fast Five, the top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. On the weekend, we still keep it to 5 minutes, of course, but we're going to pick out the biggest story of the week, the sleeper story, which is kind of one flying under the radar, perhaps, the most remarkable story, and then our favourite story of the week. So let's jump straight in with the biggest story. What was it for you?
Look, the financial contagion, the near financial contagion that's going around global markets started a week ago with the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank in California, the 16th largest bank in the US, followed through during the week when Credit Suisse, a one-time European leader, came out and said that one of its biggest owners, the Saudi National Bank, didn't want to give it any more financial assistance. That triggered a 30% fall in its share price. Suddenly, banks around the world, the share prices of banks around the world, tumbled. Real fears about whether some banks can remain viable. Now, we're nothing like 2007, 2008. We're unlikely to have financial contagion, but the thought of it was enough to send bank share prices down, oil prices down, equity markets down. Massive story, Michael.
Yeah, it is a huge story. Sean, another big one this week came from politics. And Australia is going to spend just a casual $368 billion on 8 submarines over the next 3 decades. It's our biggest procurement deal ever. Big business, of course, plenty of jobs being created. But politically, it's a very big story. Taxpayers are going to be paying for it for years. China is up in arms about it. And the fact that these are nuclear-powered submarines is significant. It's a British design. You've got Australian, US, and UK technology all in there. Highlight for me, though, was probably Paul Keating getting stuck in, which is terrific because he's very good at the bit of the theatrical flair. He said it was the worst decision by a Labor government since conscription in World War I. Clearly, he is not a fan of the deal. It is a big story just because of the economic impact, and really the geopolitical impact is significant.
Yeah, well, it's certainly the biggest political story of the year without a doubt. Michael, what about the most remarkable story for the week?
Well, Sean, we found out this week just how much more we're going to be paying for power from the 1st of July. Households and businesses can expect power price rises of between 25 and 30%. Now, that's huge. A lot of factors have gone into it. Obviously, global energy prices are very, very high. The cost of coal and gas because of the war in Ukraine, even things like outages in older coal plants. The government says that if they hadn't intervened last year on wholesale prices, the increases would have been even bigger. And just on that, the regulator actually warned that Canberra stepping in to impose those gas price caps and regulate prices actually caused several projects to stall, creating really the thing that business hates most, which is uncertainty. But the most remarkable stat, very quickly, Sean, that we mentioned this week was that in order to reach net zero emissions by 2050 and end coal-fired power, we would need the equivalent of 50 snowy hydro schemes to be built. That is just remarkable.
Yeah, very, very big week in power.
All right, let's look at the sleeper story. What was it for you?
Look, it's a funny sleeper story because it was actually the share prices of the big banks on the ASX. Now, the big four, Commonwealth Bank, National Australia Bank, Westpac, ANZ, they've lost about $60 billion worth of value over the past 6 weeks. Now, part of that is on the back of this contagion that I was talking about, Credit Suisse, Silicon Valley Bank. But there's more to it. Profit margins have peaked at the banks. Basically, they make money via something called the net interest margin. That's the difference between what a bank receives on loans and pays out on deposits. That's peaked. Also, there's political pressure on the bank to start passing through those deposit rates. Put all that together, it's really unclear where the banks are going. They could actually be screaming buys at these very low levels, but they also might end up running into an interest rate environment which isn't as conducive to profits. So the prognosis for the big four banks and the regional banks as well is really unclear at the moment, and it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. So that's my sleeper story for the week.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. Can I move on to the favourite story of the week?
Sure.
Okay, so this is probably a little bit of an unusual one to nominate for favourite story of the week because tax reform doesn't really kind of scream fun. But it was a big week for that topic, Sean, because former Treasury boss Ken Henry declared that Australia needs political leadership that does more than tinker at the edges of tax reform. He said, among other things, that the Howard government's shift towards broad-based indirect taxes like the GST has been completely undone in the last 2 decades. He said that the tax system really fails every test: economic growth, fairness to younger people, bunch of other things. I love this story just because it's not so much just because of the tax reform, but it's because there is a bit of critical thinking happening happening. And that's really the only way that things will ever change, if people are willing to have that point of view that is radically different and it starts a conversation. What was your favourite story?
Look, the fact that the Sun Cable project is going to be up and running. There's a bunch of bidders for this project. This is the big electricity infrastructure project planning to include the world's largest solar plant in the Northern Territory, the world's largest battery, and the world's longest submarine power cable linking the Northern Territory to Singapore, worth about $35 or $36 billion, includes the 4,200-kilometre cable, undersea cable. In early January, the company running it fell apart. Now, that company included Mike Cannon-Brookes and Andrew Forrest, two billionaires. Those two are now putting their hands up to bid for the Sun Cable project, but there are a bunch of other bidders as well. What I like about this story is the fact that the project's going ahead, Michael.
Yeah, it's a good story. There we go, 5 minutes and pretty much everything you need to know in the world of business. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
We'll be back on Monday morning with the top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Don't forget to hit follow. I'm Michael Thompson, and this is the Fast 5 by Fear and Greed.